You're listening to the Phillip Jordan Show, talking SEC football and beyond.
Except if I unmute my microphone on this Tuesday morning. But happy Tuesday morning to you. I am Phillip Jordan. Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Show. I am, once again, Phillip Jordan, in studio host and producer for Dustin Woods Football on 96.9 The Legend in Dustin, Alabama, and writer for Last Word on College Football, where I do cover the Auburn Tigers. I am coming to you live on a Tuesday morning. I hadn't done one of these in a while. Where I go live first thing in the morning with the show. It's going to be a fun show today. I'm going to be joined by Matt Murschel from the Orlando Sentinel. We will be discussing Florida State spring football. We'll talk a little March Madness stuff too as well, because they're in Orlando. They had some of the first and second round games down in Orlando. Matt was helping cover that. So we'll jump into that, his experience with that as well, but we'll jump into the Florida State Seminoles, who have a lot of excitement around them as we're in spring. And this is as a team that could be a top 10, top 15 team. A lot of players coming back from last season's team that did win 10 games. So a lot of excitement there. This team is looked at as one that could compete and potentially win the ACC. You win your conference, put you in discussion for the college football playoff as well. I'll open talking about the Georgia Bulldogs. They opened up spring practice last week. I'll jump into Georgia as well. And got some thoughts on some Nick Saban comments to close out the show. But before we jump into any of that, let you guys know where you can find me at podcast. Find me on social media at PJordanSEC. Podcast available on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. Check us out on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan Media YouTube channel. Hit subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video and also read that on a future edition as well. And also email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com and follow all my work over at Last Word on College Football. All right, everybody, now let's jump into the Georgia Bulldogs. I wanted to start off with that. And the simple question, can the Georgia Bulldogs three-peat this upcoming season? That's a big question. Talent's there, obviously, but let's go through it. Let's look through what Georgia has as they had opened up spring practice this past week, and some questions, some observations I have over this roster. Let's kind of see how spring progresses for this team moving forward. So we know this team's talented, super talented. Defending two-time national champions. They went back-to-back. And the first question is going to be on offense, especially, is the quarterback. And also, look, new offensive coordinator, Matt Bobo. Look, this is a guy that's no stranger to the conference as a coordinator, and also no stranger to Georgia as a coordinator. Served as offensive coordinator from 2007 to 2014. Spent a couple years at Colorado State as head coach. Went to South Carolina, didn't work as offensive coordinator there. Then was at Auburn in 21 under Brian Harsin. Look, I don't think it's fair to put everything on Mount Bobo with offense struggles for that team, because really the offense was making strides. Bo Nix was playing much better under Mount Bobo at Auburn than he was previously with Gus Malzahn. And then he gets fired after that first season in 21. He is there at Georgia in an off-the-field position. But now he will be bumping up this season as the new offensive coordinator with Todd Monken leaving to go to the Ravens. And so his first task, along with Kirby Smart and his offensive staff, will be who replaces Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett led the SEC in passing last year, 4,127 yards, 27 touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns, Heisman finalist last season. We really are not getting that debate if you think Stetson Bennett should have been a Heisman finalist at all last season. But the thing with Stetson Bennett, though, you look at the quarterbacks they have competing for this job. Carson Beck, who you would think has the leg up just because he was the guy that came in last season when Stetson Bennett came out, did blowouts, mop up duty, 26-35, 74%, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Then you got Brock Vandagriff, only threw 2 passes last season, and then Gunnar Stockton didn't throw a single pass. He's the other guy in there. So you would think Carson Beck has the leg up in that. And when you look also at this, Georgia, let's say it, and I do not mean this as a slight at Stetson Bennett, because it's like anytime you say something critical about him or something that's not over the top complimentary of Stetson Bennett, everybody said, well, you don't like Stetson Bennett. No, it had absolutely nothing to do with that. Stetson Bennett, great quarterback, great Georgia quarterback. You can label him as the greatest Georgia quarterback of all time just because he did put up good numbers. People act like he didn't. He did. And he won 2 national championships. But when you look at these 3 quarterbacks, I think all 3 of them are more talented just physically than Stetson Bennett. Now, obviously, how do these guys acclimate themselves to the offense with the receivers, with their teammates? That all matters. The chemistry, do they get that Stetson Bennett had? Look, Stetson Bennett was clutch at the end of games. There's no way around that. That's the truth. Stetson was really, really good in the games. Look what he did at the end of the Ohio State game, and when they needed him to make a play at the end of most games, he did last 2 seasons. So that's the biggest thing for Mount Boba. But when you look at this Georgia team offensively, there's going to be a lot of good players around them. And also, this team, as good as they were offensively last year, one of the top 2 teams on offense in the SEC, really one of the best offenses in the country, averaging over 500 yards per game. They didn't lose much at running back. They did lose Kenny McIntosh, who had 829 yards last season, 10 touchdowns, but he's really good in the passing game with 43 catches, 504 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. Now, coming back, you have Kendall Milton. He dealt with some injuries last season, but he had 592, 8 touchdowns. The second leading rusher was Dejon Edwards. He had 769, 5.5 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns. Also, look for Branson Robinson to have a big role too with 330 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a really good performance against Auburn, 98 yards, 1 touchdown. But when I look at these 3 running backs, I think they're all good backs, really great. But I want to know, replacing Kenny McIntosh, his production just on the ground as a running back, rushing the ball, I think Georgia's fine. But where do they find a back that can be as productive as him in the pass game? That's an interesting thing too as well. But Georgia may not need that from their running backs because of who they've got coming back at receiver, and also who they've got coming in at receiver. They did lose 3 contributors from last year at receiver. You lose Dominic Blaylock, who is still in the transfer portal. You lose Karis Jackson, who's going on the NFL draft, and A.D. Mitchell transferred to Texas. So you have Ladd McConkey returning. He is your leading of your wide receivers. 58 catches, 762, and 7 touchdowns last season. You had Arian Smith coming back. Big catches versus Ohio State. Saw what he's capable of. But then they bring in a couple transfers, SEC guys. And Ra Thomas from Mississippi State, he was their best receiver, and Dominic Lovett, who was their best receiver at Missouri. So you bring in some athletic, lengthy receivers there too as well. So I really think Georgia improved themselves at wide receiver. Oh, yeah. And then you've got Brock Bowers on the other side at tight end as well. So Georgia offensively could be better. They could be more dynamic in the passing game. I think they have a better group of receivers now than they've had the last 2 years. And that's when a team that's won national championships. So look out. I mean, I think this Georgia passing game could take off with whoever's the quarterback, as long as they do the right things and you believe they'll be coached well. But we'll see. I have always had questions about Boba. Sometimes his play calling kind of is questionable because they'll be dominating in the running game. He did this with Tank, and I even remember him doing this with Todd Gurley at Georgia. And then they get inside the 20 or inside the 10, and he's throw the ball 4 straight times. I mean, that's the only thing with Bobo that kind of gets me. Now, looking over on the defense, this team returns 7 starters. So they're losing a lot of guys once again, as did the year before. But with Georgia, you just expect 5 stars, especially on this side of the ball, plug and play. And they play so many guys. It was the same thing coming into this past season. Yeah, they lost a lot of guys, but they also played a lot of guys in 2021 when they were the best defense without a doubt in college football. I think they were the best defense last year in college football. 2021 gave up 9.5 points per game, 253.9 yards per game. Last season, 2022, a dip, I guess you would say. Georgia is trending in the wrong direction defensively. Last season, they gave up 12.8 points per game and 292 yards per game. So Georgia needs to work on their defense. I tell you what, the defense is starting to slide. All jokes there, of course. But the guys they lost, of course, you lose Jalen Carter up front. I want to see how you replace him because he was a disruptor for them in the middle. He was just unblockable. They got talented players up front on the defense line in Georgia, but I don't think you either replace someone like him that can disrupt everything in the middle as he can, especially putting that inside pressure on quarterback, because sometimes that pressure at the middle is more important than the pressure coming off the edges. And then at linebacker, Robert Bill, Nolan Smith, they are gone. You've got some good players at linebacker too as well. Jamin Dumas Johnson is one guy to look for there for Georgia at linebacker. And then Kaylee Ringo and Christopher Smith in the secondary. They got players there too as well. So I'm not really worried about talent for Georgia, but there's some guys there that had some leadership on this team. I'm really interested to see how Georgia can fix that, can adapt to that. And it'll be very, very interesting going through the spring and seeing how Georgia handles all that. And just some news on Georgia. They did hire former offensive coordinator at Clemson, Brandon Streeter, as analyst. Of course, he was replaced by Garrett Riley at the end of the year, who was the Broyles Award winner there at TCU. So Georgia added in there, kind of like they had when Mike Bobo, he just, be an analyst and all that stuff. So adding more coaches who have been at big programs is never a bad idea. So that is my look at the Georgia Bulldogs. What are your thoughts? What do you think about Georgia? Do you think this team is capable of three-peating? I think they are. The East is pretty much theirs. We'll see with Tennessee. Lost some receivers. Obviously, losing Hendon Hooker. Joe Milton played well in the bowl game. We'll see if he can pick up where Hendon Hooker left off. But what are your thoughts? If you're watching on YouTube, post in the comments below and let me know what you think about Georgia's chances at three-peating this upcoming football season. All right, guys, now I am going to play my conversation I had on Monday evening with Matt Murschel. We'll talk Florida State football and a little bit of March Madness at the beginning, but we'll talk Florida State football as they are in the midst of spring practice. Joining me on the show today is Matt Murschel. He is the national college football writer for the Orlando Sentinel. We're going to be talking all things Florida State Seminoles today. And Matt, I appreciate you taking the time. Busy weekend for you with the NCAA tournament down there in Orlando, but I appreciate you jumping on the show and talking some Florida State football.
No problem. It actually worked out really well. Florida State went into spring break last week. So the week I was really kind of busiest, doing NCAA tournament stuff here in Orlando, basketball tournament stuff here in Orlando. Florida State was off, so it was kind of a nice I didn't have to juggle both jobs during the week, so it kind of made things a little bit better on me.
Yeah, before we jump into the football, how was it over the few days there covering the NCAA tournament down there?
It was great. It's one an event. I've done it a couple times now here in Orlando, and it was outstanding. It started off with the Furman game with them hitting the last second shot to beat Virginia. That's March Madness in a nutshell right there. And it kind of started from there and went on. And we had really good crowds down here. I think they combined, they were the most attended games they've had since they've hosted them in the last 6 or 7 times. So it was great. Lots of good basketball. Got to see a lot of guys who are probably going to move on to the NBA at some point and play there as well. And it's a time like no other. It takes a lot out of you because you have to spend a lot of time around the teams and things like that. But unlike football, you get this kind of sense of Cinderella almost at every turn. And I think it's something that I think makes things a little bit special.
Yeah, I was watching that Virginia Furman game as it was going on, and when he made that throw in the corner, I was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I can't imagine what it was like being there in the arena as that was going on.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I was actually mid-court behind the scores table, and I saw the intercepted half-court pass, and then they kicked it back to the guy in the JP Piquet, who was in the corner, who hit the 3-point shot, and the place went nuts. And like I said, it really kind of felt, those are the moments that you really kind of look forward to, and the Furman people were great. I mean, you think about it, they traveled down, again, this is a lot of them weren't sure if they were going to be able to how long they were going to be here and those kind of things. And so for them to be there, and go into the Saturday showing was really kind of special. And I think it really kind of showcased the fan bases. And I mean, San Diego State was another one. I mean, listen, they were a 5 seed, mid-major, so to speak. They were there, on Saturday. They won. It was a great showing. And then you had Duke and Tennessee, and obviously those are 2 power programs. And the fans came out to see them play, which was a very physical game in its own right. So a very interesting time, and I'm glad I was there. And now I'm shifting gears back to college football for the spring games.
Well, I mean, you watch that Duke-Tennessee game, it's like you're watching a football game there anyway. So, I mean, that's, you're kind of easy transition.
Very much so. There was a lot of physicality in that game, and it was something that you really, they talked about going into it. They thought it was going to be physical. You saw a lot of that. And I think that's where Tennessee's going to, it's going to be interesting for them, moving forward. I think an interesting storyline throughout that, and I tweeted it out after FAU won last night, was, Danny White, who's the Tennessee AD, his brother Brian is the FAU AD. And so it's brother against brother, so to speak, in this. And both those guys are huge college basketball fans and basketball fans in general. In fact, their father, Kevin White, who was an AD at places like Notre Dame and Duke, and I think he was I want to say it was Rhode Island, might have been another place. When they were in those towns growing up, they used to sneak into, the gyms, and the brothers used to play against each other. And the other brother, Mike White, who used to be the Florida coach, he's now the Georgia coach, they used to always sneak into these arenas and play, and they'd get caught by security guards. So there's a very good, basketball lineage that kind of goes through that family. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when they face each other up in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, absolutely. So jump over to Florida State football, and just it's an interesting time when you talk about the Seminoles, because there's a lot of excitement. And I feel like this has probably been the most excited people have been getting around a lot about a team, like having some big-time preseason expectations as we get through the spring and get through summer, probably since, 2017. I think that was the year they opened up with Alabama. DeAndre Francois was the quarterback then. Just what do you make of how Florida State's gotten to this point now? Probably this time last year, everybody's like, wow, is Matt Murschel going to make it? I mean, going to year 3, it hasn't been going so well, and now it's a complete turnaround for them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was up at Florida State before they started spring ball. They had like a little media luncheon with Mike Norvell and the assistant coaches, and it was a much different feel than it was, let's say, in 2020 when they first started out. Because I think the expectations are so much higher. There's a lot of buzz, a lot of confidence. But when I asked Mike Norvell about that, I said, how do you handle these kind of expectations going into this season? You haven't had to deal with that since you got here. The program hasn't dealt with it, like you mentioned, until 2017. So what do you have to do? And he said, listen, our expectations in the program are a lot higher than what people outside of it are putting on us. I mean, we know we want to win games. We know how good we can be. They've done a really good job kind of imagining the roster, if you could say, so to speak. I mean, when Mike Norvell took over in 2020, he did not have at all the type of players that you needed to have in a Power 5 program. And a lot of that came because they had coaching transitions. You saw people leaving through the transfer portal, and he had to go out and really kind of rebuild this roster. And he did it through recruiting. He did it mostly through the transfer portal for the first couple of years. And he was able to add some talent. He was able to add some athleticism. He was able to add depth. And you saw it all kind of come together last year. They really kind of started to gel really well. And I think having Jordan Travis back at quarterback was a huge plus for them. I think that, the players are buying into the chemistry, the family kind of atmosphere that Mike Norvell has created there. You're seeing more and more transfers who want to play there now. People actually want to play at Florida State. That wasn't the case in 2019, in 2020. I mean, this was a program that was kind of left for dead, and now they're back there. So it's going to be an interesting time. Now, you could say all you want, to the media and to everyone else, but how they handle this is going to be something to keep an eye on, because they're going to go into the season probably a top 15 program, maybe even top 10, depending on who you listen to. They open up against the program in LSU here in Orlando that's going to be a top 10 program more than likely. So the expectations right out of the gate are going to be right there. And I think that's how these players haven't had to really deal with that. Now they're going to have to deal with the spotlight. How they handle that and how they move forward from that, I think, is going to be something to keep a very big eye on moving into 2023.
And, as we look into with the spring, and they're in the midst of spring practice, and, going to the 15th. I plan on, me and some friends are going to come down to Tallahassee and see the spring game on the 15th. But with this team, with this roster, when you look at for spring, what are the big storylines in your opinion?
Well, I think the big storylines are going to be some of the positions where, they return a lot of talent at a lot of positions. So they're going to be fine in so many ways. I think it was ESPN that had a report that they returned like 87% of their production from last year. I think where it's going to be interesting to look at is looking at that offensive line. I know that they have some pieces coming back, on the offensive line. So they feel they're going to be comfortable, but they also have some new faces, and they have some people that they want to bring in and feel like can step in. They're going to have to replace basically three starters actually. They're going to have to replace almost the whole right side of the offensive line. They have to replace a guy in Dylan Gibbons, who was a really big piece of what they were trying to do on the offensive line. He was at left guard. They brought in a lot of new transfers who they feel like can help out. Casey Roddick is one. He's a transfer from, Colorado who, could have gone anywhere in the country, decided to go to Florida State. He's been working out at center. They brought in a guy in Jeremiah Byers. He's a guy that from UTEP who had a lot of experience, playing, I think the last 2 or 3 years, was a starter. Keandre Jones is another transfer they brought in from Auburn. These are guys that are going to come in and probably more than likely step into those spots. And I think that's going to be huge for them. This is also a group that they've spent the last 3 years rebuilding. Their offensive line back in 2020, 2019 was one of the worst in the country. It was just putrid. I mean, they gave up something like 45 sacks that season. Now that's not going to be the issue. Now they've got more than enough depth at that position. They brought in a bunch of talented freshmen in the last 2 years. I think those are guys that you're going to see more of them, over the next couple of years. So to me, that's one of the positions. I think offensive line is going to be interesting. I think also too, you're going to want to look at that secondary. That they lost some key pieces. Obviously, losing Robinson was a guy, the safety that they lost last year, who's going to go to the NFL. That's going to be key. So they're going to have to find a way to try to replace some of those guys. Again, transfers will be a key part of that as well. And then I think just, the overall looking at like the wide receiver position, that was something that they did a really good job of last year addressing with the transfer portal. They brought in guys like Micah Pittman and Winston Wright, and Johnny Wilson and Deuce Spann, and those guys were going to step up and make big plays. Well, now that Micah Pittman has announced that he's going to be out for 4 to 6 months while he's kind of had surgery on his hip, it's going to be interesting to see which one of these other guys is going to step up. They brought in a 5-star recruit they signed in Hakeem Williams, who I think will be a guy who will step into the role sooner rather than later. So those are kind of positions. Other than that, they've got a lot of talent on this team, guys who've come back. And so Jared Verse, on the defensive line, a guy who could have been more likely would have been a first-round pick in the NFL draft, is back. And it's going to be interesting to see how he's paired up on the one end, who they kind of bookend him with, because I think that's a position, defensive line, that a lot of coaches believe can be one of the strongest units on this team. So lots of places to give an eye on. But again, when you have so much talent coming back, it's not like you're having to teach players how to do things. It's more about just getting them ready to kind of to handle some of the situations you're going to get this year.
Oh, and, of course, offense in Jordan Travis, just the development of him over the years, and in the big season he had last year. What was the key last year to his improvement as a quarterback from what you saw?
Well, I think one of the biggest improvements was that they surrounded him with athletic and talented players. I think it was twofold. I think it was one, and I think also the offensive line, like I mentioned. I think the offensive line being as solid as it was, that was a big key contributing factor, because early on, they didn't want to see Jordan run around as much as he had done the previous season. They wanted to give him opportunities to sit in the pocket and find receivers and go downfield more. They wanted him to stretch the field. And I think he wasn't able to do that. Last year he was. The offensive line bought in time, was able to kind of help, get the running game going and establishing. That kind of helped take a little bit of pressure off of Jordan. And then they brought in these talented wide receivers. Micah Pittman became kind of like an escape valve for him. When things were kind of breaking down, no one was open. Micah Pittman was the guy you could go to. Johnny Wilson's development, bringing him in. They didn't have a deep threat like a Johnny Wilson. The guy was 6'7", who could really reach up and make those great grabs. So Johnny Wilson comes in, and all of a sudden he becomes the main target. Him and Micah Pittman are the top targets of Jordan Travis. Then you add other pieces around him. I think Trey Benson's development at running back was huge. He was able to really kind of get things going, big burst runs. Those kind of things opened up the passing lanes and were able to kind of let Jordan do a lot of more things. So, and I just think overall he just matured. He was healthy and he matured in a lot of ways. And I think he was able to read defenses better. He was more comfortable in the offense. And I think that's why going into this season, that's why I think the school put together the kind of their Heisman campaign, because they really do feel like if everything goes well and everyone's healthy, I mean, there's an opportunity for him to really take that next step. And he's one of those type of players that can not only, find open receivers, but can also run with the football as well. And you saw some of those runs this past year. He would make some amazing kind of scrambles on the sides, flipping over defenders and things like that to get those extra yards or to get a touchdown. So they feel like if everything goes well, he's got an opportunity to be one of those top quarterbacks in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you get a showcase game to kick the season off. When we get to the season, I mean, you got LSU, who's going to be another team. It's going to be top 10, top 15. I mean, to me, just right now, just looking ahead to the season, I mean, that's the biggest and on paper the best game in the open first week. No disrespect to week 0, folks, but week 1, that is the hey, everybody's down for Vanderbilt Hawaii again. That's the matchup everybody wants to see. But sorry, Vanderbilt fans, the one that's listening. But anyways, the Florida State LSU game, that obviously that's the prime time in that first week, and that's a great opportunity for Jordan Travis. You have a big game there that really can catapult you even further into the Heisman conversation.
Yeah, very much so. And again, being an opening weekend, it's the Sunday night game again. This is the second straight year where they open up on a Sunday night. There's no other games on that day. So really, you're going to get the primetime matchup. You're going to be on everyone's eyes. So if you have a huge, strong performance, you're going to be probably one of the top quarterbacks or the top Heisman candidates coming out of that weekend. And it's a good statement game for them. They beat LSU in Orlando. Then they go the next week. They host Southern Miss. Southern Miss is not going to be that great of a team. You go to at Boston College, and then you get that wonderful road game against Clemson, on September 23rd. And that's an opportunity really where, people are talking about Florida State, contending in the ACC, maybe being the favorite in the ACC this year. That's an opportunity right there where if you can knock off Clemson on the road, which is a difficult thing to do, then that kind of maybe can set the tone for the rest of the season. And then you look at what's going on the rest of the way, and, you've got Virginia Tech, you got Syracuse, you got Duke. Those are all games that you feel like you should be heavily favored in. You're at Wake Forest. That's going to be a difficult game, I think, obviously. And then the next week you're at Pitt. Those are going to be challenges. But then you get Miami at home. So there's opportunities really to see how far this team can go. I'm not one of those people on Florida. I'm not 100% sold that this is a top 4 team in the country. Like I know ESPN, I think, had them going into. But I think they're easily a top 10 team. So a lot's going to depend on what happens on that Clemson game.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier defense. Obviously, Jared Verse coming back. Just like you said, that's a first-round talent that's coming back. 9 sacks last season, second in the ACC. I mean, they were second in ACC in points allowed behind NC State, top 15 total defense nationally, 5th in sacks in the ACC. Oh, and you mentioned the secondary, but when you look at this defense for them, what do you see the strength? Because they got some guys coming back. It's not just Jared Verse coming back on the defensive front, too. There's plenty of talent on that defensive front with him, and you just take him away, there's plenty of talent there. So you mentioned the secondary, figure some stuff out there, but any other things on this defense you kind of got your eye on or strengths of the defense?
Well, I think the line is every coach that I spoke with, defensive coach I spoke with, has said the defensive line, they feel like it's going to be something to keep an eye on. I mean, you mentioned Jared Verse. Obviously, he's the guy that everyone's going to be focused on. Fabian Levitt coming back was huge for this team. He's really their big run stopper in the middle. I think he's a guy that if he's 100% healthy and ready to go, I think they're going to be one of the toughest teams to run against. They bring in a guy in Darrell Jackson, a transfer from Miami. They brought in Gilbert Edmond, another transfer. These are all guys they feel like that they could step in right away and be ready to go, and be huge contributors. They've got some other younger talent coming in, and Patrick Payton, was a guy who developed, who was a young guy that they kind of brought in and felt like he could do some things last year. Lots of upside to him. They feel like he could be a force, maybe kind of spelling Jared Verse here and there. And then Braden Fisk, is another transfer, came in from Western Michigan. It was like the MAC Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he's a guy that I think they've got so many of these talented pieces that they can just move around with. And that's what, Adam Fuller, the defensive coordinator, told me is, their plan is to build these rotations where they could just bring in guys and just bring in units, left and right. And then, they can rest some of these guys. They can rest, Jared Verse, so he doesn't have to, play almost every play. They've got enough guys to do that. That's something that Florida State hasn't been able to do for quite some time. And then you look at their linebacking core, Kalen DeLoach, Tatum Bethune, Brendan Gant, DJ Lundy. Those are all guys that play. They were all starters. So in the middle, they've got experience coming back as well, and they've got some really young talent that they would love to get in and pick into that rotation. So this is a good defensive unit. I think this could be the best defense, if they're healthy going into the season, they've had in a long time, and that's saying a lot. And they know that and this is what Mike Norvell told me, if we're going to win and we're going to win consistently, we got to win with defense. And they know their defense has to be next level, and I think that's where they feel like they're at this point.
So when you look ahead to the season, are you one, because it seems like this is where everybody's going? Florida State and Clemson. That's the two teams that's going to decide who is going to come down to them two for the ACC championship.
I think it is again this year. I mean, I think Clemson has this is probably when I say weakest, I'm not being disrespectful in any way, shape, or form. This is probably the weakest that Clemson has been. You look at their quarterback situation changed a lot. Over the off season, they made some changes to, obviously to their coaching staff. They brought in some guys that they feel like really are going to be able to help them out this year. Their offense is nowhere near been as solid as it was the last couple of years. DJ Uiagalelei was supposed to be the guy, remember, and now he's moved on to Oregon State. They feel like this is a team that, last year won 11 games. And most people feel like that was kind of a failure in some ways, because they weren't in the college football playoff mix, and so I think it's probably more than likely going to be those two teams. I think North Carolina is going to be a team that's going to be hard, that's going to put up a lot of good points, because I think when you have the kind of talent that they have, they've got to fix some things on the defensive side of things, and I think Pitt's another team that's going to be, they were there again last year, they're going to be there. I think that some of the surprises could come from Miami. Again, if Mario Cristobal can get some of those things righted, it's going to help them out a lot. Although I think they're probably another year away from that. So this is a ACC that was strong, but not nearly as strong as it's been in the past. Wake's got to have a new quarterback, so I think that's going to set them back a little bit. NC State's got a new quarterback. I think that's going to set them back a little. So I think really the Clemson Florida State rivalry is really where it's going to be at when it comes to the ACC.
Yes, and for everybody wondering, they do play on September 23rd, so that's already that'll be the fourth game for Florida State this upcoming season. So they get past LSU, like a couple weeks later, got to go deal with the other Tigers from another Death Valley, and to go to that Death Valley. So it's a lot of excitement. I'm happy to see it. I think college football is better when Florida State is looked at as one of the elite or one of the top programs in the country when they're really good. So it's going to be fun. Be fun checking them out on the 15th too at spring game. And Matt, this has been fun as always, talking Florida State football with you and ACC and all that good stuff and just all things college football. But if the listeners and viewers want to check you out online, where can they find you?
They can go to OrlandoSentinel.com, or they can follow me on Twitter at OS Matt Murschel. Lots of stuff. I mean, Florida State wraps up, like you said, on the 15th. They're back playing spring ball right now. As long as they stay healthy, like I said, I think things will go really well with them. And then going into the season, plus, we've got our paper covers all the other state teams here. We've got Florida, UCF coverage, Miami. I mean, we've got it all. So it's a fun time to be in the state of Florida when it comes to college football.
Yes, because the sport does not end. It does not have an off season. It continues to go and go and go. But anyways, Matt, as always, I do appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
Sounds good. No problem.
All right, everybody, and what do you guys think about the Florida State Seminoles? Post your comments below. Let me know, and I'd love to read your thoughts on a future edition of the Phillip Jordan Show. Before we get out of here, and once again, thanks Matt Murschel for coming on the show. Always look forward to our conversations with Matt. He does a great job covering college football down there at the Orlando Sentinel, college basketball too as well. So go check Matt out as well. So before we get out of here, just some quick Alabama stuff as we close it. So there will be a Thursday show, 2 shows this week. I will be joined by Matt Stahl. He's from the Columbia Tribune there in Missouri, covers Missouri Tigers. They've already finished up spring practice. They had their quote-unquote spring game on Saturday, held indoors, no fans, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. But we will be joined by him on Thursday, kind of recap Missouri spring, to see where the football program is at, who showed up, who showed out, who played well, what's the strengths and all that stuff with the Missouri Tigers. So we'll talk about that on Thursday. But before we get out of here, some Alabama stuff to discuss. And Nick Saban took the podium, spring for Alabama as well. And Nick Saban was talking about freshman defensive back Tony Mitchell, who Alabama has suspended after an arrest in Florida for drugs and weapon charges. And I'm going to read part of an article over at CBS Sports for you guys. This is courtesy of them, and Chip Patterson wrote the article. Alabama has suspended freshman defensive back Tony Mitchell following his arrest last week in Florida that resulted in drug and weapon charges. Mitchell, who is facing a charge of marijuana possession with the intent to sell and or delivering, was driving a car with another man, Christopher Lewis, as a passenger when police detected the odor of burnt marijuana at a traffic stop, according to the Holmes County, Florida Sheriff's Office. The two were taken into custody when there was a search of the vehicle, produced a significant amount of marijuana at a set of scales, a loaded handgun, and a large amount of cash. Lewis was also charged with carrying a concealed firearm without permit. So Nick Saban, like I said, they have suspended the player, Tony Mitchell, freshman defensive back. But then I feel like Nick Saban took a slide at Alabama basketball coach Nate Oates with this comment. Everybody's got an opportunity and make choices and decisions. There's no such thing as wrong place at the wrong time. He said, it is what it is, but there is cause and effect when you make choices and decisions that put you in bad situations. So that's kind of, so Nick Saban is making a statement. Maybe he does not agree with Nate Oates on the basketball side of him. This, of course, that is relating to what Nate Oates said about Brandon Miller back when he was being part of that whole of the murder investigation there that involved some other Alabama basketball players. So I kind of wonder how that's going to play in the athletic part. Of course, Nick Saban, he is the king of the university at Alabama, so that's in there. But I kind of wonder if Nate Oates is going to take some offense what Nick Saban said. We'll see. And we'll dive in Alabama a little bit next week, I think. I'm going to deep dive it. Kind of like I did with Georgia. I think I'm going to, on one of the shows next week, maybe Thursday, I'll open up, talk about Alabama, what I'm looking forward to what they have on their team for the spring, and then kind of what they're looking at and where you want to see things go with them. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillip Jordan Show. Appreciate you checking out the show. If you're watching live on YouTube, thank you. Hadn't done this in a while. Had a little snafu there at the beginning. Hey, these live things in the morning, I'm just waking up. It is what it is. It happens. But be back Thursday morning talking Missouri football with Matt Stahl from the Columbia Tribune. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Remember, you can follow me on social media at P. Jordan SEC. The podcast available on Apple Podcasts, so please follow, rate, and review over there. For some reason, the show has just appeared on Spotify, so I got to set up in the Spotify thing for the Phillip Jordan Show, but that will be up really shortly. Check it out on YouTube. Love it when you guys check out the videos. It really means a lot to do that. Go to Phillip Jordan Media YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all the notifications, and please leave a comment on the video, and I'll read those on a future edition as well. Read all my written work at Last One College Football. And you can email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Anyways, hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Let kindness be your compass, and I'll talk to you guys later on down the road.